Let's stick with Peter. Not only did Peter have to deconstruct the ramifications of legalism with regards to how he viewed himself and his acceptance before God, but he also had to deconstruct what that legalism had led him to believe about others. Pastor White led us to a critical scene in Peter's life at the home of a man named Simon. While the text doesn't explicitly say that Simon was Jewish, it's probable to conclude so based on the events that follow. You see, the fact that Peter was staying with Simon at all was evidence that he had been following the teachings of Jesus. For Simon, who was a tanner by trade, lived a ceremoniously unclean lifestyle according to Jewish standards. The typical Jew would never be caught associating with Simon, even though he was also probably a fellow Jew. But Peter was not the typical Jew, not anymore. He had been radically changed by Jesus. Through Jesus' teaching, Peter had learned to look past Simon's status of ritual purity to see the way that God did, as loved and accepted. But while at Simon's house, Peter had a dream that pushed his understanding of God's love even further. In that dream, he was told to eat food that for a Jew was ritually unclean. Even in his dream, Peter protested, "I have never eaten anything that our Jewish laws have declared impure and unclean." To which God responded, "Do not call something unclean if God has made it clean." And just to make sure that Peter knew this was no ordinary dream, God repeated it 3 separate times. So what's up with that? Was this another lesson for Peter about deconstructing the legalism of the Jewish law, this time though focused on the dietary restrictions? Yes, but it was also so much more, because the vision wasn't ultimately about food or animals, but about people. God was introducing Peter to the idea that just as there were no animals that God could not make clean, there were no people that God could not make clean. And he wasn't just talking about Jewish people. Instead, God was preparing Peter to welcome the Gentiles into the community of God's people. You see, legalism can certainly wreak havoc on our perception of self, but it can also really harm the way we view others. We can scorn others who don't abide by the same rules that we grew up with, regardless of how arbitrary those rules might be. To be sure, some laws are good, necessary, and they reflect the heart of God, but we can never earn God's love through them, and neither can anyone else, which also means that others aren't loved less by God because they don't follow his rules. Neither should we love them less. Or as Peter put it, God has shown me that I should no longer think of anyone as impure or unclean. How might God be challenging you in this area today? Who are those that you have deemed unclean or impure because they don't abide by the same code of conduct that you ascribe to?